The National Review has stepped in to offer some clarity on this. Yeah, I know, right? It's like everybody was just holding their breath, waiting to hear what the National Review thought. So this is just signed the editors, right? So it's a collective statement of the magazine. So this is, all the editors at the National Review and probably the ghost of William F. Buckley all signed off on this thing. The title, as you saw there, is Zohran Mamdani is a public menace, which is just J. Jonah Jameson-esque.
I feel like he should be like, whoever wrote that headline should be slamming their fist on the table, demanding pictures of Zohran.
Exactly. So before we move on to other subjects, I did just want to go through this because I don't know. Look, I will admit that this is a perverse fascination that I have with stuff like National Review editorials. That a lot of this really should be left to refute itself. But I have this disease, so let's just do this. Let's take a look at the text of this National Review editorial. Zohran Mamdani is a public menace. It's not very long. It's just 6 paragraphs. So it starts out with a little apology for the fact that they're doing this. It says, National Review is not typically in the habit of weighing in on Democratic primary races. But even if we were not founded, headquartered in New York, the fate of the world's most important city would still matter to us, as it does to America. Therefore, decency requires us to state the obvious. Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old progressive candidate in tomorrow's election for the Democratic mayoral nomination, belongs on nobody's ballot, whether ranked 1st, 5th, or 100th. Okay. Now, personally, I don't find it that shocking. The National Review would essentially be endorsing Andrew Cuomo, which is, in effect, I mean, there are 2 guys who have a chance of winning. This is an editorial about how you shouldn't vote for one of them. I don't think it takes a genius to connect those dots. And they're essentially saying in this first paragraph, well, this is weird for us, right? That we're de facto endorsing somebody a Democratic race. I don't actually think it's that weird, considering that Cuomo is being backed by a bunch of donors who also donated to Trump. And anyone whose memory is long enough to remember that Andrew Cuomo, this is actually a fun piece of trivia, used to be the governor of New York. Should really look into why he stopped. But in any case, when he was governor, I mean, he spent years doing his best to stymie the state Democratic Party from getting anything done by backing something called the Independent Democratic Caucus, IDC, which was basically a subset of Democrats in the state legislature who would consistently vote with Republicans. So really, I don't think it's quite as much of a man bites dog story as they're portraying it as. That in a choice between that and a Democratic Socialist, the National Review would have opinions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the slate of the IDC are the ones that Kamala Harris was trying to win over, win her rightward shift to become president. I think that might be the only Republican she won over.
Mamdani, acknowledged by all to be the only candidate threatening the resurrection of former Governor Andrew Cuomo's political career. So they are acknowledging here that they are de facto endorsing Cuomo. Just worth noting and thinking about who Cuomo's got in his corner. Is currently the progressive darling of New York, which on its own terms is enough to disqualify him for the position he seeks. He's a member of the DSA with a list of campaign promises that revisits nearly every discredited left-wing fantasy of the last decade. Universal health care, rent freezes, the use of social workers as opposed to policing to control urban violence, etc. His most prominent campaign initiative is a promise to eliminate city bus fares, a fantasy which would, if implemented, blow a hole in the MTA's budget, inevitably lead to service reductions. He has also advocated the eventual implementation of a $30 minimum wage. Okay, so some of this is just them noting that Zohran is the left-wing candidate, and there are right-wing magazines that don't like that. There's not a lot, there's not a lot to be said about that. But it is worth noting that this list this very short list, right, of his major policy planks includes at least one just outright lie, and one claim that's at the very least, very misleading. So the outright lie is, let's put it up on the screen one more time, just so to remind people the wording is the thing about the use of social workers as opposed to policing to control urban violence. No. In fact, Mamdani is not calling to defund the police. What he's calling for is supplementing the police with investment in social workers who could do certain kinds of emergency calls, like, mentally ill, homeless person, is causing some disruption, but, there's no particularly violent threat to anybody, in addition to the police. And in fact, the case he's made for this is that this would free up existing police resources to focus on actual violent crime, right? So the claim that he's saying social workers instead of police to control violence is doubly just flat out incorrect, right? He's talked about social workers in addition to police, so the police can handle violent crime and the social workers can handle things where there's no imminent threat of violence, but where otherwise police might be called to. Nick French had a really good article about this in Jacobin called something like Zohran Mamdani is right about public safety, for people who are curious about the details of all this. But again, that's just not true. The one that's at the very least misleading is the thing about rent freezes, which makes it sound like he's talking about just, freezing all rent throughout the city, which, whatever you think about that, he hasn't gone anything like that far. What he's actually talked about is stabilizing rent for already rent-controlled apartments, right? I mean, that's just a pretty straightforward difference there. But in some ways, what really, and this thing about the how free buses would mean a reduction in fare. I mean, the proposal is to eliminate fares and replace that with revenue from general taxation. So I don't know why the assumption here is that one half that would happen, but the other wouldn't. But what really gets me here is that universal health care and free buses are being described as left-wing fantasies. I mean, there are lots of cities all around the world that have free bus systems, and it works well. In fact, there was a pilot program that Zohran championed on city council to experiment with free buses in New York City that worked quite well. Led to actually increased ridership. Like less altercations, on the bus, because so many of those were about people being challenged about paying fare. Like good results all around. And this universal healthcare is a left-wing fantasy. I mean, look, I'm not going to do the accent, but as a great man likes to say, every other major country on earth has managed to do this. It doesn't really seem like a fantasy.
I just want to say I'm living in one of those fantasy worlds where we have free buses. They just extended it throughout the summer. It's a program to reduce it. They increased money on rich people by like 1%, and they were able to give us free bus rides. So today, when I was exhausting myself bringing my bike home because I was out drinking Saturday night and got a ride home, I didn't have to pay fare to ride the bus to get my bike home. So there's that. And now I got it all through the summer till September, end of September.
It's still a fantasy, just one of those fantasies that sometimes happens in lots of different places, but still, our fantasy is that it would happen in New York.
Matt McManus, who's one of our guests tonight, is backstage and points out in the private chat that Detroit, for example, has managed to implement this, which again seems to me that, look, I'm a West Coast loyalist. I'm skeptical, but I keep being told that New York is the greatest city in the world. If they can't get it together to offer free public buses, I'm really increasingly skeptical of this claim that it's the greatest city in the world. But if it's just a fantasy that New York could figure out how to do that. But all right, let's.
If it's so
go to
great,
the-
why are they always coming out to visit me? I mean, all
yeah.
the people with money in New York City live in Western Mass and the Berkshires.
Fair enough. Well, let's move on to so this is number 3. New York City need only look at the fate of Chicago with its ultra progressive and despised mayor Brandon Johnson for a truer vision of the sort of future Mamdani is advertising. Instead, okay, so there's a left-wing mayor in Chicago, and he's had problems, and and he's unpopular. That's what they're saying. Therefore, he would be. Thank God there are no conservative or centrist mayors that that would apply to. But I want to move on to this part. Instead, we oppose Mamdani's moral unworthiness. He is worse than a democratic socialist. Okay, I have a hard time imagining anything worse than a democratic socialist, but we're about to find out what that is. He is, as evidenced by an adult life's worth of political actions, a deeply committed pro-Hamas activist and advocate for the abolition of Israel. Okay, the pro-Hamas thing is just a lie. It's obviously a lie. The abolition of Israel part is the more interesting part to me, because in fact, Zohran has pissed off the lunatic fringe of the Palestine solidarity movement by refusing to say that he doesn't think Israel, has a right to exist. You can find videos of people heckling him in really crazy ways over this. What he said is that they should just have equal rights for everybody there, which I'd really like to. I would really like if the National Review explained why that was bad. Why having equal rights is bad. I mean, I will note that there was a time when this magazine had the courage of their convictions when it came to explaining such things. Just as a little Easter egg, I would recommend that people Google a unsigned editorial in the National Review in 1957 called "Why the South Must Prevail." But tell me now why equal rights for members of all ethnic groups is a bad thing. I guess, to be fair, they do kind of take a stab at it in the next paragraph. So they say, Mamdani has stated repeatedly, including during a recent mayoral debate, when pressed directly on the issue by both Cuomo and the moderator, that he does not believe Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. Invoking the by now familiar code language, he instead argues that Israel could only exist, quote, as a state with equal rights, unquote. That is to say, the, quote, right of return, unquote. A week ago in an interview, Mamdani refused to condemn the use of the phrase globalize the Intifada, universally understood as a call to bring Hamas's particular tactics of resistance to the Western world, and doubled down by favorably comparing the term to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Okay, so the first part of this is claiming that saying people should have equal rights is bad because that would mean that these Palestinian families who spent the last 77 years living in refugee camps might be able to go back to the cities they were ethnically cleansed from in 1948. Again, why that's bad, they don't feel the need to explain. That it's just in National Review world, it just goes without saying. But to my mind, the more serious part, right? Let's get this back up here for a second. Of this is this business about globalizing the Intifada. Now, why that would be universally understood as a call to bring Hamas's particular tactics of, quote, resistance, unquote, to the Western world is unclear to me. That the first Intifada, even if all were, like all you hear when you hear that phrase is, the sort of original Palestinian context was before there even was a Hamas. It started at least before there even was a Hamas, and mostly did not involve Hamas-style tactics. But really the outright lie here is, or maybe this is an outright lie. Really, the severely and misleading at best statement is the double down by favorably comparing the term to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It's a really garbled way to put it, but what they mean by that is that he pointed out that if you say the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, if you use that phrase in Arabic, the word at the end of the phrase is Intifada. And that's just like a fact about the Arabic language, that the word for uprising is Intifada. And I think he was using that to make a point about the misleadingness of restricting the word in that way, and again saying just it's at best extremely misleading to parse that by saying he was favorably comparing it to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. He was pointing out that the Arabic translation of the phrase Warsaw Ghetto Uprising includes the word intifada. Now, for the record, my own view is that both sides of the discourse about the phrase globalize the intifada annoy the shit out of me. I think it's a very LARPy slogan. And it's kind of edginess for the sake of edginess and feeling radical, and I think it's needlessly counterproductive in the war for hearts and minds. And it's just kind of LARPy. I mean, I don't think anybody who uses that slogan is actually planning to start an uprising in Brooklyn or Silver Lake or wherever they live. But also, I think sort of parsing this sort of vague revolutionary slogan about a global uprising against injustices as a call for violence against diaspora Jews is kind of ridiculous. But I want to move on, right? Let's do, I think, what are we up to here? 5. So it says, these are not fashionable or late adopted positions for Mamdani. While in college in Bowdoin, is that how you say that?
Yeah, I think so. And if we piss them off, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, fair enough. Fuck him. All right. College, I have nothing against this college. Anyway, he co-founded his school's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine for years, including his brief tenure as an assemblyman. Mamdani has been a vocal supporter of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement designed to academically and intellectually isolate Israelis and Zionist Jews from Western scientific discourse. He has repeatedly and emphatically called Israel's war in Gaza a genocide. All right, so I just want to pause on this. Obviously, that last part just shows that he, is aware of the dictionary definition of the term. And I also want to note here that we've gone from accusing him of wanting to foment violent uprising to being mad that he wants to sort of try to turn Israel into a state of equal rights, as he says, through a non-violent economic boycott, right? I mean, that seems like quite a shift to me. But in any case, it goes on. In 2017, he recorded a rap song sending his love to the Holy Land Five, leaders of the Holy Land Foundation for Relief and Development, convicted in 2008 of providing material support to terrorism to Hamas. Now, the insinuation they're trying to do in this line is that these people were guilty as charged, that Zohran knew they were guilty, and that's why he was sending them his love, because they were funneling, they were providing some sort of support to Hamas, and he loves Hamas, and that's why. If you spend like 30 seconds on Google looking into this, right, the Holy Land Five, right, are people who are raising, charitable funds for desperate Palestinians who were accused of this, yeah, but the trial, that convicted them was kind of a joke on due process grounds. You can find civil rights lawyers from all over the world who've condemned it and said it was kind of a show trial because it was all based on hearsay. Human Rights Watch, has called for these people to be released, said they're not guilty. So, I think a much more obvious interpretation would be that he agrees with all these civil rights lawyers that they weren't properly convicted. He doesn't think they were guilty. But they say perhaps most tellingly of all, when news of the October 7th massacre first arrived, Mamdani issued a statement saying nothing about Hamas. Instead, he called for ending the occupation, dismantling apartheid. Now, if you follow, we don't have the graphic, but if you follow their link to the statement, when they say, and remember, this is the thing they said was most telling of all, when they say he said nothing about Hamas, I mean, that's true in the sense that he doesn't use the word Hamas. He also doesn't use the IDF, right? He doesn't name the IDF. He also doesn't name the Likud party, right? But he talks about, the deaths of people in the last 36 hours in Israel and Palestine. So he's clearly included people killed by Hamas. And the whole statement is a call for de-escalation and peace, which you just absolutely would not think from the National Review's summary of it. But wrapping up, because we need to go to the main event, and last paragraph of this, it says, the mayor of New York has a job unlike that of any other politician in the United States. Theoretically, he is just another local politician. In reality, he is a representative for America on the global stage, the leader of the most important metropolis in the free world, the gathering place of the United Nations. The city is also home to more Jews than anywhere outside of Israel, a population increasingly threatened by hatred and violence. For the sake of the city, America's global reputation, and simple decency, voters should leave Zohran Mamdani's name off their ballot altogether. He is not merely the worst choice on offer, he is unacceptable under any circumstances. All right. So, what I got out of that was that for some reason, it would be bad in terms of, you know, the chances of like intracommunal violence happening in New York or the reputation of America in the world to have a mayor who supports human rights for Palestinians and is very much on record as opposing violence of any kind. And, you know, speaks at synagogue, seems to be interested in all sorts of, you know, interethnic bridge building. I don't know why that would be true. I mean, this is one of those places I really want them to spell out the mechanism, right? Like what exactly do you think is going to happen if this guy's elected mayor? That's going to lead to the you know, pogroms in New York. But I guess to their minds, this just goes without saying. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.